All right, this is our last little bit of part 2 ecology notes. So the last thing that we talked about were factors that affect population size. Some depend on the starting size of the population, whether they're big or small, and some that are density independent factors are things like natural disasters, seasonal cycles, human impact. So our next topic is going to be talking about specifically how populations are growing and comparing different growth rates. So populations obviously change over time. They either are going to increase or decrease. This happens by births and deaths or organisms immigrating or emigrating. That's entering the population or leaving the population. Populations can also change by the standard or um, average age and mortality rate as well. So how populations operate can look different depending on the average ages and organisms in the population. So if the majority of my population is really young, it's going to affect it in a certain way. If the majority is really old, it's going to affect it in a different type of way. So one thing that ecologists use to study this is our population pyramids. This is a graph that shows the distribution of various age groups. Because they're really comparing the age of people and the sex of people, they are also called age-sex pyramids. It typically represents a country or region of the world and normally forms the shape of a pyramid. So this is an example, we'll see some more, but there's three different types I want to talk about. One is stationary, one is expansive, and one is constrictive. Just based off of these words alone, you should be thinking stationary is probably staying the same, expansive is probably growing, and constrictive is probably decreasing. So the reason why they're called a pyramid is because the top of the pyramid is generally smaller because older people have a higher chance of dying than younger people. Therefore, it's shaped like a pyramid because most of the time a population has more younger people than older people because older people are dying. So this is how it's really set up. It's usually males on the left, females on the right, and it's divided by age groups and population size. So younger populations are down here, older or towards the top. So let's talk about stationary populations. These are going to be the most rectangle shape. Um, if I look at this graph, notice how the different cohorts, which are groups, are relatively the same. Yeah, it does get smaller as they get older, which makes sense, but these are really similar in size. What does this really mean? It means that the birth rates are pretty standard, they're low, but the quality of life is high because I have people that are at an older age that are living just as well as people who are younger. Expansive populations. So this is going to be a population that's growing really fast. The bigger the bottom of the pyramid, the more quickly the population is growing because young people are the ones that are going to reproduce. So if I have a large amount of young people, those young people are going to reproduce, and therefore the pattern will continue to have this population grow. What does this really mean? It means that people are giving birth at a high rate, but the lower the life expectancy. So if I see this, it's really tapering down as the older you get. So once you reach a certain age, you're not as likely to survive as you were when you were younger. And constrictive populations. These are populations that are majority of older people and it is shrinking. So not as high of a birth rate, but my elderly is living well mostly means that healthcare is available to a large portion of the population. So these are my three different types. They're not labeled here, just labeled them A, B, C, but which pyramid is going to be growing the fastest? If I was to ask you a question like this and you were to look at these three, hopefully we would go with A for this one. The bottom of my pyramid is the largest, therefore it's going to grow the fastest. which of these pyramids is going, or which of these populations are going to grow, but at a slower rate? So we're left with these two. So notice that this one, I would say, is more of my rectangle, where this one has a lower number of younger individuals, right? So because my younger population is still there, it's just evenly spread out, this is still going to grow. Whereas this one, notice how my younger population is very less compared to up here. So this one is going to grow slowly. Okay, which pyramid is going to decrease in size or shrink? That is going to be my C. So hopefully we can see the difference visually between these different types of populations. Remember, this one's very obvious, and then distinguish it between which one is really more even or rectangle, and which one is kind of tapered towards the bottom here. So when a population keeps increasing, it keeps growing and growing and growing, there's plenty of resources available. This is called exponential growth. So as time is going on, the population size is increasing. I see my graph look like this. It's a very distinct curve and it's continuously going up. We call this exponential growth. However, what will eventually happen as time goes on? Will the population always keep getting bigger? Will there be an unlimited amount of resources forever and ever and ever? Will this continue to go in this direction? Not really. There will come to a point where a population can't get any bigger, and it's going to start to level off. We're going to talk about carrying capacity in a second, but as I see it's increasing here, but as my resources are running low, it starts to level off. The habitat or the land, it can't support the higher population. We call this a logistic growth pattern. So very important to know the difference visually between a population that's in exponential growth and a logistic growth pattern. So carrying capacity. A capacity is kind of like a limit, right? And a carrying means, all right, how much space, how many resources are available that can kind of support this population. So this is our maximum number of individuals of a particular species that the environment can normally and consistently support. The population naturally grows. Once the resources for the population runs out, the carrying capacity is reached. So as my population is growing, it's going to reach a point where it can't hold anymore. The capacity is full. Therefore, the population is going to level out as we saw. So this point is called the carrying capacity. The population will typically go up and down periodically around the carrying capacity. It's not just going to hit this number and stop, right? We can't really control that about populations. We can't be like, okay, no, you're not going to have any more individuals entering this population. That's not realistic. So what really happens is the population grows, it goes over the carrying capacity, therefore they're running out of resources, therefore the population decreases. Once there's more availability of resources, it's going to go up again. Once it gets too high, it's going to go back down, and I see this kind of teetering around this carrying capacity. If the environment changes, the carrying capacity can change too. So this number is not set. If something happens, such as this example, this is talking about deer. Well, after my carrying capacity was overshot here, a habitat was damaged. Therefore, this habitat can't support as many deer as it used to. Therefore, my carrying capacity is now lowered. Okay, so it is not a constant number, it can change. And the important thing that you guys need to know is that it's going to teeter-totter around that number. It's not going to just level out and stay. Okay, we're going to really talk about human population in the next section of these notes. We're going to talk about human carrying capacity, what our human population is looking like, and how humans are kind of affecting our ecosystems and climate and all that jazz. So this is our end of our section 2 ecology notes. Email me if any of these topics you did not get or you want some extra explanations on.